Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2023 film The Puppetman. It's a Shudder original, and it's coming to Shudder on Friday, October 13th. October 13th. A good one. Friday the 13th. Love it. So this one was directed by Brandon Christensen, who did 3 films that have been on Shudder before. The first is Stillborn, which I have not seen. The second one is Z, which I didn't really like. And the third one is Superhost. And I did enjoy Superhost, especially because of the performances in that one. But I would say this one, I'll just tell you off the bat, this one kind of falls between Z and Superhost for me. I like Superhost more than The Puppetman, but I definitely like The Puppetman significantly more than I enjoyed Z. So there's some good with this one, there's some bad with this one in my personal opinion, but when I'm done with all this, I would love to hear your thoughts on this movie if you've seen it, when you see it. You can put it down in the comments, and we can talk spoilers in the comments. Go ahead and do that. And also just give me like a sentence or two letting me know why you feel the way you do, because it doesn't really mean a whole lot to me if you're just like, I like it, I don't like it. I just want to see where people are coming from, and it is possible, especially if your opinion is different than mine, that maybe I missed something. Maybe you can change my mind a little bit on the experience of this movie. So yeah, just throwing that out there. This one, written by Christensen as well, Brandon Christensen, as well as Ryan Christensen and Matt Manjourides. And that individual produced Return to Nukem High, Mutant Blast, In Search of Darkness, Subspecies 5, Blood Rise, Castle Freak, and the new Vinegar Syndrome movie coming out soon, 8 Eyes, which I'm hearing good things about, but we'll find out when it actually does. Again, Shudder Original coming out Friday, October 13th. Now to the synopsis. This is no spoiler review, so I'm not going to give you a whole lot synopsis-wise. It's basically about a girl who has had some familial issues in her past, some trauma, if you will. And it kind of shows you a little bit of that early on, like where it comes from. And then it kind of goes forward in time, and she's trying to get on with her life. She's in college. She's got friends. She's trying to be kind of normal. And something comes back up. You know, her past is back to haunt her in a way. You know, kind of echoes of issues from her childhood have come back. And it's a horror movie, so it's in a horror capacity. So that's all I'm going to say. I don't want to say too much, because if you want to watch this movie, and it was decent enough, I think, to give it one view, you should be able to go into it not knowing a whole lot. So what I wanted out of this movie, with it being called The Puppetman, was someone who like commands puppets, or someone who like is a giant human that is like a human puppet. I wanted something like Toulon commanding his puppets in Puppet Master or something like that, but unfortunately I didn't get that, but it's still a decent enough movie. Where are the puppet movies? That's what I want to know. But anyway, definitely an interesting opening scene for this one that makes you want to know where it's going. It presents a very attention-grabbing scene early on that makes you like, okay, this is something. First of all, it just kind of like is intense, and then it makes you think, okay, how did we get here? What's the backstory on this? What's the significance that this is going to play in the overall story of the movie? And they do a good job of kind of making you understand later in the film why things played out the way they did. So that's good. They use an interesting way to give additional backstory for what happened in the beginning, in that initial scene I was just talking about. It is more of a tell than show thing, which I'm usually not a big fan of, but I think this was unique enough, and it was incorporated in a way that I did appreciate it, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess telling more than doing actually is something that can happen, at least in this capacity, and I'm good with it in a movie. So the acting is pretty good in this one. There weren't any instances of anyone where I was like, oh, that acting's kind of shaky or not great. It's a range between solid to quite good acting. So if you are always going into, you know, these Shudder exclusives and originals, like, what's the acting going to be like? This one's pretty good. The dialogue, unfortunately, does get a bit annoying at times, especially early on. There's this juvenile banter that goes on amongst the friend group, which, you know, it's normal to have, like, a little bit of, like, a juvenile banter. But the problem for me is the banter's, the content of it, the content of the banter is a bit over the top. And it just goes on too long. It probably takes place for about up until the first like 20 or 30 minutes. It goes on too long. I'm not a fan of it. It grates on me. And that was one of the big things writing wise that I didn't really like, although there were a few other issues that spawned from the writing of the script that I'll also end up talking about. And this is one of them. There's one particular character who is very annoying. Their personality grated against my nerves. It may happen for other people, which I didn't understand why the character was written this way, because they're not supposed to be a wholly unlikable character. They're supposed to be a character that you actually care about to some degree, but they're just not great. You know, they grate against your nerve. They're annoying. They're not a good person, and you're supposed to care about them. So I think that was kind of a big misstep with the writing of that particular character, which also gets me to another aspect of this, which is I don't think the characters were that well written in the first place. The main character, fine, and there's another character who's a little bit older than the primary characters in this, but for the most part, most characters are kind of one-dimensional, unfortunately. But yeah. There are some odd character shifts that end up happening. Not a lot, but from time to time. One in particular instance, I'm not going to, say the events of what was going on. I'll be very vague because I obviously don't want to spoil anything. But there was a character who was questioning another character, and that other character was kind of like gave a reasoning, and it wasn't a satisfactory reasoning at all for anyone, and then just tried to change the topic, and the character who asked the question just went along with it. When everything you've known about that character and know about that character would indicate that they would not just do that. They wouldn't just drop things like they did in this. It seemed like a big misstep from the writing, and yeah, it was just like, it kind of takes you out of the experience of the movie because you're just like, this is not what this character would do. There is an interesting investigative aspect to the story, which is one of my favorite things about it. There's this mystery that you're like, ooh, are we gonna, get more tidbits about this? And unfortunately, because this film actually has an issue with pacing, part of that is because the interval between little tidbits of information that you get about the overall story, that you get about the mystery that's at play here, they're not thrown out at the best timings, unfortunately. It does seem like you get a little bit in the beginning, and then there's this very large stretch where you're not getting a whole lot. Things are happening in the movie, plenty of like horror related things, but you're just not getting a whole lot of story development going on for quite some time. And then it just feels like they kind of just throw you the rest of it at the very end at that point. So I didn't like that aspect of it, unfortunately, but maybe other people will feel differently about it. There is a sequence where it keeps cutting between two things happening for a while that are both intense things, and it was done so well. I mean, the directing was good on it, the cinematography, the music composition, and the way it was used. The acting was good, and just the written content of what was supposed to happen in the sequence was quite good. It was legitimately super intense, and I don't experience that a lot in films, especially horror films nowadays. So, good job in that sequence. It was really good. It's literally this one where they're going between two different locations of something going on with two different characters, and it was just really well executed, in my opinion. So I quite enjoyed that. Unfortunately, there is some not so hot CGI in this, so that if that bothers you a lot, just know you'll see it. The good news is there's not a ton of CGI used, so that time passes, and then you can just kind of move past it, like I'm doing right now. At one point, the story does take an interesting turn. Like I was saying, they kind of have this pacing issue with it where you're kind of like, you start to question, because you hadn't been given portions of the overall story for quite some time, are we going to have a satisfactory story? Is this actually going to be interesting in the end? So there is a point later on in the film where they do give you something where you're like, oh, okay, you're pulling me back in. You're giving me more of a reason to want to pay even more attention to this movie and giving me hope that the ending will be good. Now, on the topic of the ending, I thought it was solid. I didn't think it was a great ending. I didn't think it was a bad ending. It kind of ended up in between for me where it was good enough, solid enough. So, yeah. There is some solid gore in this. That's the other thing I wanted to say. If you're someone who loves some gore in your films, this had better gore in it than I expected it would, especially for a lower budget affair. I was kind of impressed with the brutality of some of the stuff that goes on and the level of gore to it. So I did like that aspect of it. But in the end, my biggest issue with this had to do with pacing and those few like writing issues. But obviously, as you heard, there are a bunch of good things too with this. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm giving it a pretty solid 3-star rating. So yeah. Please, like I said, share your comments about your thoughts on this film. Also, do me a solid, subscribe to my channel. Do the likes to all my videos because that helps me out. And you can also hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos. But regardless, I really do appreciate you taking your time to watch this. And until next time, keep it brutal.